Common Purpose is a live stream podcast featuring Tim Kelly, a Chattanooga-based businessman and mayoral candidate who loves this city and has made his life here. Beyond the conversation, Common Purpose is a show about elevating the bonds that unite us as a community and resisting the forces that would tear us apart.
Welcome to Common Purpose, a podcast about elevating the bonds that unite us here in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I'm Tim Kelly, and today we're tackling a topic that bridges the political divide, localism, a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And with us today is my old friend and the best person I could think of to discuss this topic, and that is the one and only Jeff Stiles. Hi. How are you today, man?
I'm glad to be here.
Well, me too. And this is going to be a real joy, I think, and I hope those of you that are committed to watching this whole thing or have a bowl of popcorn and are settled in, because it may take us a while to get through this. But you know,
are you saying we're long-winded?
Well, you know, some might say that, but in this case, this is a real joy for me because the roles are reversed generally.
Yeah, it's true.
I don't know how many times I've come to see you out at the one radio ranch or another, but I'm on the hot seat. Not that your seat's hot, but I'm the one asking the questions today, pal. So.
I've tried to make you shift in your seat like that before, and I rarely see you do this.
Oh, well, you know. So, I mean, localism is an interesting concept. I never thought of myself as a localist, but, you know, the more time I've spent in Chattanooga, the more I began to consider the idea that what goes on here is most important. And we'll get to this a little later.
Sure.
But, again, you know, you're a guy who came here from West Georgia years ago. And
Ohio before that.
And Ohio before that, and has thought, has acted through your actions and your convictions more as a localist than anybody else I could think of, very frankly.
I like the town. I like the area.
So,
I chose the place.
For those of you, the two or three people on the fringes that might not know who the hell you are, tell us who's Jeff Stiles.
I'm a hell of a guy, Tim.
I know you are, but
really
tell
am.
them why you are.
I've been doing talk radio here since '92. Before that, I came here as an outdoors person.
Yeah.
I was in radio before that. Loved music. I was going to be Ranger Rick, and then went to pick up a girl at a campus radio station for a date. Didn't even know we had a campus radio station. And switched majors when I walked into the studio and just saw the albums on the wall. It's like lightning striking. Decided I couldn't make any money being a DJ, so I went into radio news. Couldn't make any money doing that, but that's what brought me here. And but I came here because I wanted a break from school. I was actually going to go back and get my major in journalism. Not my major, my master's in journalism. And I wanted to learn how to hang glide. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to learn how to hang glide, no matter where you are on the planet, you come to Chattanooga and you go to Lookout Mountain Flight Park.
That's right.
I figured I'd be here about 6 months, and I stayed. I tried to break away a couple of times, and I came back. The place is just absolutely a wonderland of natural resources. Mm-hmm. It has everything I was looking for, and it still does. I live now, of course, I learned how to fly at Lookout, and I live now at the other hang gliding site up at Henson's Gap, the home of the Tennessee Treetoppers. Mm-hmm. I live within walking distance of the launch ramp there all these years later. I sort of maneuvered my way from being a radio news guy into sales and then into advertising. I succeeded quite a bit in advertising, won a lot of awards. And then left and came back and I bass-acked my way into talk radio. Again, thought it was going to be just kind of a holding pattern for a while until I got another job as a creative writer and copy guy. And I guess I was good at it. I get to argue with people.
What do you mean you guess?
I get
to
argue with people for a living.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something I'm naturally gifted at. And so that's it. And I got into kayaking, got into whitewater. I've done a little rock climbing and caving. That's not for me. Some of the other sports have caught up with me. I used to skateboard a lot, longboard. I did that up until recently. And given my wife's permission, I will be able to do it again one day. But I mean, I love being outdoors. I love being here. I love the people. I love the atmosphere. And the town has grown around me. And
Yeah.
it suits me. It suits me beautifully.
It does indeed. It suits a lot of folks. Well, you care to talk at all about localism generally,
Sure.
and what you think makes the concept of localism particularly pertinent today?
Well, when you first told me that was going to be kind of the topic, I was wondering. I mean, there are so many different definitions. If you really want to look it up, I was wondering, does that mean like the surfers who say get off our beach,
Yeah.
don't come to our break? This is for locals only, or does it mean the buy here, buy local, farm to table, or does it mean putting the local businesses first, or trying to project your political ideology, Republican, Democrat, whatever, onto local politics? All that stuff is in the definition. Which one would you like to focus on?
Wow. I mean, I read this book. I guess that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you here today because, how sometimes you read a book or even in the micro sense, you hear a word sometimes that brings an idea into sharper focus. And it was always kind of there beneath the waterline. But then, so this book's called The New Localism. Got named Bruce Katz. It was actually Ken Hayes that brought him to town for the Enterprise Center to speak. And they gave away a bunch of free copies. And normally, somebody gives me a free copy of a book, I use it for a paperweight, But something about it piqued my interest, and I read it. And it was really fantastic. And it brought into sharper focus a lot of stuff that we've talked about over the years about the power of, how localism, A, is sort of an antidote to populism, both left and right, and B, how cities, how we've got the whole hierarchy wrong, right? We get all spun up about, in our Fox News or our MSNBC, our cable news channel of choice, and all these kind of crazy ideological things. And then worry a little bit about Nashville, and a lot of times just gloss over local issues. And when you think generally about what constitutes our quality of life, broadly speaking, it's local stuff, right? And so if we focused on what's local, then worry about Nashville, then worry about D.C., we'd probably be a lot saner and happier.
You're exactly right. And I'm not saying that just to suck up. Ken has a particularly good way of putting his finger on the pulse, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He's done that for years. The incredible, remarkable, stunning, stupefying divisiveness that we got in the country right now is actually, it's gotten to the point of being just downright frightening along these partisan lines. And I have no idea why. To be frank, I can't.
I thought your name was Jeff.
I can't even begin to fathom why any local races are partisan.
Right.
Why is any particularly things like a sheriff's race, a judge's race, any of the councilmen or commissioners, even the mayor's race? Why would that be partisan? Let's look at it. I mean, what does the Monroe Doctrine have to do with the county wanting to purchase a farm at the outskirts of the county and to turn it into an industrial park? What does abortion have to do with the core curriculum of our county school system? What does the wall, our immigration policy, have to do with trying to get a city park put together that would include a water element? I mean, we've done the visioning process how many times? People keep saying they want a water park. Is that Republican or is that Democrat? Is that right or left wing? I think you need both to do the breaststroke or to be able to paddle a kayak, right?
Right.
That has nothing to do with anything. And I'm not seeing bumper stickers, on cars that have to do with getting that water park put in. I'm not seeing flags flapping on the back of F-150s that have anything to do with trying to get a park put in.
Yeah.
Are any of these other issues? I'm just flabbergasted that people are so passionate about things that are going on 1,000 miles away inside a place that they have no control over. And they literally have no voice. Who represents me inside D.C.? Who represents me? Don't tell me that my congressman does or any of our senators do. They might be fine people, but they never even say, there are people in my district who believe this way. I disagree with them, but there are people in my district who think this way. It never happens.
Right.
Ever.
No, I know it, and it is super frustrating. If I hear one more person talking about Portland, like, you know how far away Portland is.
What do we have in common with Portland?
I know.
What does Red Bank have in common with Portland?
And it takes me back to the early days of talk radio when you first came to Chattanooga, and I was a huge adherent, a huge fan, and I listened. I still do when I wouldn't say religiously is probably too strong a word, but if I'm not otherwise busy, I'm tuned in and listening to you, because in those kind of early golden days, well, not that the current days aren't.
We
can't be
invite
golden.
all theologies to listen to Nooga Radio, by the
right.
way.
But talk radio, local talk radio, really was kind of the switchboard of localism.
Everybody was invited.
That's right. Everybody was invited, and everybody talked. It was kind of the living room conversation about what was going on. I felt like we had, at that time, this really healthy public dialogue in Chattanooga. And it was, again, that's where I put most of my time and energy listening to what was going on there. It's still the case at your network and your former employers. And it just seems like, man, would we be a lot healthier if we got back to that and worried less about...
If somebody feels like they're not being represented here in town, the number is 710-9927. Represent yourself. I mean, what stopped Edna Taylor from calling in and saying the aquarium's going to be a waste of money? She was wrong. Hey, guess what? I was too. Yeah. What stopped June Griffin from calling in and saying, I think this or I think that? What stopped Jack McDonald from calling in? What stops anybody from calling in? And that's just a plug for what I do, but it's the common ground.
Yeah.
And if you don't feel like your voice is being heard, there's a place it can be.
Yep.
And you don't have to go through any rigmarole. And it is exceptionally frustrating. Let me say this. I admire anyone who is off their couch and doing anything in this community. I can disagree with you. Some of my best friends in this community are people that have been ripped on the airwaves. Mm-hmm. I mean, have been criticized heavily, and they understand that's part of the game, and they get over it. They understand that's part of the game. Right. After it's over, they flip the switch, and they come back out, and they're big boys or girls, and they pull up their pants, and they get back out there, and they keep doing what they do, and we go on about the business of trying to make our community better.
Yeah.
We've lost that somehow.
I know it.
There's a lingering, thin-skinned, hurt-feelinged aura that I don't know if it started at the top and worked its way down, or it just started at the sides and worked its way to the middle. But nowadays, people just seem to be highly and easily offended, and they stay that way. I said something before the show started in Chattanooga. I know this isn't just a local phenomenon, but it is something that I've noticed that's getting worse in this town. When you come up on any sort of topic or issue, any sort of controversy, if you don't choose a camp, one will be assigned to you.
Well, I think about, I'm a reader, and I don't know, I was George Orwell's famous 1984. For those that haven't read it, is probably it's a great book, and it's a great illustration of this false dualism that we've all kind of been that we're trapped in, right? Sure. And there's a corollary in the sales business, right? The choice close. What'll it be, sir? This one or this one? And your brain tends to go, that one, rather than none of the above.
Neither. Thank you.
But that is where this Orwellian, for those of you that haven't read it, you should go back. If you skipped it in high school, go read 1984, because it very much describes this idea. And it's a lot easier to control people that way, this false dualism, that it's this one or that one, pick one. And it's this dance that precludes rationality oftentimes by trapping us into one of two choices.
Absolutely.
And I don't know how it got so pronounced, or how we lost this idea of common purpose, the name of the podcast. But we have, right? And so and this is not a campaign podcast per se, but I can tell you from being out there talking to a lot of people, I feel like Samson holding up the temple a lot of times, because it's like people dragging you this way and dragging you that way. Pick a side, pick a side, pick a side. And that's why this topic is so important. I'm so passionate about it, is trying to say, it's not that we don't, and we'll get to this later, but it's not that I don't have opinions about national issues. It's just that they are distracting and irrelevant from the more important topic of the ground under our feet and our neighbors and our schools and our roads and our bridges and our, and all the things that we should be focused on first.
Well, all right, so who is going to be the first one to fill the pothole in your street? Trump or Biden?
Yeah.
Who is going to be the first one that's going to actually take care of the leaky roof at your kid's school?
Right.
Trump or Biden? That's such an irrelevant and silly and just plain downright stupid question.
You know what percentage of education funding is federal? A lot of people don't realize this. It's like 10, maybe less than 10. It is negligible. Yeah.
There's the Constitution said
K through 12.
There's nothing in the Constitution
Yeah.
that even sets a role for the federal government when it comes to education. And I know that the times change and we have to change with it. But I know this will shock people. I have described myself, and I've been described as a liberal, and I describe myself as left of center because it's easy. You have to have a quick way to describe yourself sometimes. But I am really more of a constitutionalist and a libertarian, and I'm kind of as my grandfather would say, a morphodite when it comes to politics. I'm very pro-gun, I'm very pro-Second Amendment. I am actually pro-states' rights to a large degree, but I'm also, pro-choice. I'm all over the map. But I guess if you had to choose one, I'm going to lean to the left, and that's just more convenient for people to pigeonhole me. And that's important, apparently.
That is exactly it. And I think, but again, it has to do with a sort of a laziness of mind where people just want to say, what are you?
Sure.
We've got a thing coming out that says, my party is Chattanooga. We're quite proud of it. You'll see more about that soon.
Good.
But,
that makes sense.
Well, so let's get back to Chattanooga a little bit, and then we'll come back to the national stuff. I've run across this observation on the campaign trail. I'm really anxious to hear your thoughts on it. And that is this. Chattanooga is full of people, talented people, many of whom are in this room, behind the camera, I might add, who could be in another market making more money. Or some higher station on a career ladder somewhere. It's unquestionable. If you start paying attention to that trend, you'll find it is a hell of a lot more common than you might have imagined.
Sure.
But we're here, right? And we're not trapped here. We choose to be here. So why are we here? And so implicit in that is really two things, I think. One, there's something special about Chattanooga that keeps us here. Part of it is external, exogenous, and then part of it is that we're here with a lot of other people that, all you can really say, inferentially is that you value something more than money. Because if you just wanted to make more money, you could be in another market probably making more money.
Is it a cliche to say quality of life?
It's not. That's where I go all the time. But I wish to God we could think, maybe by the time this podcast is done, we
come
can
up with something
unpack
different.
that a little further.
Well, the one of the people you just referred to, yesterday I sent a picture. I live where I live, and by the way, I need to go ahead and say this for the record. I am not currently a citizen of the city of Chattanooga. I live in Sequatchie County, and I sent a picture of where I actually walk to because I actually have poor cell service at my home. I walk to a bluff when I need to use the phone. I sent a picture to one of the people in this room.
Do you have to walk to the bluff when you use the restroom too? I'm just curious.
No. I do that just sometimes because I want to. Because I'm sort of Jethro.
You're a dude like that.
But I walked to the edge of this cliff to actually use the phone, and I sent a picture to a young lady in this room. And I said, this is my phone conferencing room. And she sent back the message, living the life. And I don't make a lot of money, and I have a 45-minute drive in. Yeah. That's my commute. And people say, God, you live so far out. Well, what do the people in Atlanta right now, what are they driving when they live very close to work, but they're sitting there in this gridlock traffic every day hating life?
Right.
and they can see where they work, and they're sitting there for an hour and a half pounding on their steering wheel, just dying.
Well, what's crazy is a lot of them aren't pounding on their steering wheel. That's what amazes me when I'm down there in traffic. I'm like, how the hell do these people do this? Because they're not. They've become inured to it, I guess. I don't know, but
I'm tooling across the mountain, looking through my moon roof, and just listening to the radio, jamming to some tunes. I walk over here, make some phone calls with my friends. I'm watching hawks fly over. These people pay to go and vacation at a cabin, at a place that's much like where I live. This is perfect for me.
Do you know Mike Costa?
Yes, of course.
So Mike's moving back to Chattanooga. He sent out an email today. I don't think
everybody does.
Embargo, and it's great. And but he said something. I wrote it down. I have this little miniature whiteboard thing on my desk, and I wrote it down because I'm like, this is a slogan maybe for the Chattanooga Tourism Company. But he said, "There's more to life."
There is,
and it's a great slogan for Chattanooga, right? There's more to life.
Yeah, it is.
That is in a nutshell. But here's the interesting thing too. As I began to further contemplate that, you answered it exactly like I would answer it. But what it also implies is that Chattanooga is full of people who share that same ethos, who share that same value, and what that means, I think, is also implicit in that is this idea of community. Right, that people that they tend to be less egocentric and less me. I'm here to rack up my bank account, and more about something more that there is more to life. And so it might be a little hint as to why Chattanooga tends to be able to get more stuff done collectively. It just seems like this is a place on a national scale where when we do decide, when we can make up agree on our common purpose, we can get stuff done easier than other communities seem to be able to. And that may be part of it.
I tend to go to the outdoor community and maybe even further to the extreme sports community and find somebody who lives west of the Mississippi who is a climber and take them to any number of places around here and let them just pull up to either the bottom or the top of a climbing wall, and they get out of their car and they walk 10 feet to where they begin their ascent or descent. Take somebody who's a paddler who is used to dragging their boat 1.5 miles down a trail to get to a put-in, and they pull up to the staging eddy at the Ocoee, and they literally put in right next to their car and play for 45 minutes and get back in. They don't even have to go down the river and drive back to town, and they're going, "Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? We've got this kind of easy access to what I love to do."
Yeah.
And I mean, and then just do something that's even more placid. I mean, you could take some of the most low-income people around here and take them out anywhere along the Tennessee River Valley, and they're sitting there and they're opening up their can of bait, and they're looking at each other and saying nothing and throwing a bobber in the water and saying, "Wonder what the poor people are doing." Yeah. They're sitting here fishing and they're not doing anything except enjoying themselves. Yeah. It's God's country. It truly is. Yeah. And so many people around here, this is one of my frustrations. So many of the locals don't realize what they have.
Absolutely not. You're exactly right. I mean, even my wife, Jenny, you were nice enough to work on some of this outdoor council stuff we were doing. We're doing these working groups around these different areas. And I mean, they're out, as you said, our outdoor assets are so unbelievable. And a lot of people hold Asheville up as being the paragon of kind of the southeastern outdoor community. But she was working for Solomon. We would go over there and do shoe demos and meet with people and drive around. And, we're both big trail runners. She's a much bigger trail runner than I am. But, the time in Asheville taught me real quick. They got nothing on Chattanooga in terms of access to climbing, trail running, water, you name it, any number of areas. And again, I think we don't leverage that enough.
Somehow more panache, and who knows how that happens. Yeah. But yeah, no, a lot of them sneak down here on the weekends.
We've got a long list of low-hanging fruit that I think we could do a better job leveraging
Absolutely.
Here to get more people here who are like-minded.
City leaders among them just need to actually, again, get up off their couch and get out sometimes.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, okay, shifting gears a little bit. How do you think local media needs to kind of play a part in in shepherding. Do you think it's working? You know, I mean, again, we talked about the golden days of talk radio. The newspaper business has been difficult. You got a couple of websites that are out there trying to do it. Does local media have a part to play in kind of pushing back against partisanship and supporting the idea of localism? Could it?
Wow.
I don't often hear you speechless, Jeff.
Yeah, it does, and it can, and it should, but will it? I don't know, Tim. That's such a sore spot with me.
Yeah.
We have had so many excellent journalists that have come through here and moved on. We have a lot of excellent journalists that are still here that did the same thing that I did, that other people that we've just discussed did. They came here from other places and chose to live here. Unfortunately, the nature of media has changed to such a degree. It's really pathetic.
Yeah.
It's pathetic. It's sad. It's woeful. The idea of challenging the status quo and upsetting your advertising base is just unthinkable. And the people in charge of each of all of the networks, all of the franchises, all of the different stations that represent all of the big networks here. I mean, they're all business people. They all came up and got their MBAs, and it's all about the money. I mean, do we really have 3 hours worth of local news every night? Of course we do not.
Right.
But they want it because they want to sell the advertising.
Right.
Are they going to go out and do hard-hitting stories that are going to upset, and I'm not going to use the term power structure, we're all very tired of that, but the powers that be, people that are writing the checks that let them fill up that 2.5 to 3 hours of news every day, and then again another hour and a half or 2 hours every morning? The answer is no.
Right.
And so they're giving these young reporters, this is a springboard market. They're working on their tapes so they can move to the next level of medium-sized market to try to get somewhere and be somebody in this huge hierarchy.
Right.
And that's what they're working on. So they're sent out to get a sound bite. And I can't tell you how many times my wife was in the media for quite some time. And trust me on this, one person in the media per household. That's the limit. And she was very good at what she did as a reporter. And we sit and watch, and I'm talking mostly about TV here. It's happened with the newspaper. It happens with radio, those stations that actually have a news department. We watch the TV like this. Sometimes it's like reporters will literally let award-winning stories go by because they're looking for the soundbite, and the person they're interviewing will give them the story in their answer that they should follow up and say, well, what do you mean by that? What did you mean by that, sir? But they don't even hear it.
Yeah.
They've got somebody in their ear going, no, that's you're off base. You're off base. Get us the soundbite. Get us the soundbite. And so they sit there and ignore the lead that was just given to them, this big, fat, juicy lead, and get the soundbite. Say thank you very much, and close it up and run back.
Yeah.
And it's just infuriating.
Listen, man. I don't know if you know this, but I have a background, and I wrote for the school paper in high school. I wrote for the Columbia Spectator at Columbia, and later on for the Federalist paper with a guy named Neil Gorsuch, who went on to bigger and better things.
We all know.
And then interned at The Nation, which was a very lefty, liberal newspaper, very highly regarded in journalistic circles. So I've thought a lot about journalism, and it worries the hell out of me, because I think constitutional democracy depends on the Fifth Estate as sort of the catfish in the fish tank to keep things clean and to keep people honest. And I think in mid-sized cities in particular, that capability has been hollowed out. And it didn't start yesterday, but it seems like it's worse than it's ever been. And I'll be damned if I know how to fix it. But, I mean, it needs to be fixed.
I remember just being, out in the field, and I'd be standing there next to Dick Copper and John Wilson and reporters who didn't care
Yeah.
what the advertisers were going to say, and they would go back with a story, and they were going to write the story the way they knew the story needed to be written, and they had bosses who would back them up. I'll say this, and I'm not trying to insult anybody out there. Don Newberg.
Yep.
And we called him Mr. Newberg. And how many people in your life do you call Mr. in this day and age? And everybody called him Mr. Newberg. He may be the last general manager of a radio station or a group of radio stations that came up through news, through programming, not through business. And he was so hard on us. If we tried to fudge on a story, he would rip us up the middle. I remember one time there was a story about it was a rape, and it was a situation where it was incest. It was within a family. I did not name the perpetrator because I was afraid of naming the victim. And he waded into me like he was storming Normandy. He said, if you can't give the details of the story, don't tell the damn story. Can you imagine somebody doing that today? And I know that's kind of a touchy subject, but I'm saying that's the kind of cojones that people had back then that they are completely lacking now. And I can point to everybody at every station. I can point to the people at the newspaper right now who have those cojones, but they're being held back. And I know they have to bite their tongue until it bleeds from time to time. And I know that they would like to be able to do their jobs and do it better.
I've got a theory. You know, I've always got a theory.
I know.
I've generally got a theory. Would you like to hear my theory?
Sure.
Two-part theory. One general and one more specific to Chattanooga. I mean, I think from where I sit, you know, or sat, my day job as a car dealer, I'm spending a lot of money. It's almost like, you know, you got your feet on two lily pads, and the lily pads are drifting apart between digital and paid media. So the dollars are more and more spread out. And, you know, in a healthy economy generally, I think, you know, news organizations can be more aggressive because they're less beholden to a particular, you know, advertiser. But now I think that induced a level of anxiety into the news business that hasn't subsided. And a lot of these places are figuring out how to monetize their stuff and doing a better job with it. And again, you know, the local version of that is, you know, the fact is that Chattanooga, and you'd be amazed at how controversial a statement this is, but Chattanooga is still a poor town. I mean, you know, you go to certain zip codes and they're obviously doing just fine. But if you look at the aggregate, if you look at our average income, if you look at our median income, particularly in certain neighborhoods, it's half the state average and a quarter or at least a third of the, you know, the national average. And that stuff flows through to spending at stores. And, you know, until we're economically healthy, and these media outlets are, as long as we've got a market-driven approach, and I don't know of another approach. I mean,
no, there's
short
not
of
one.
Pravda, you know, it's going to happen. So
We have to survive.
we have to survive. So I just think, you know, I think I'm beginning to see hopeful signs that the media business generally is evolving to be more robust and sturdier and more anti-fragile in that Nicholas Nassim Taleb sort of way, so that they can produce quality journalism and they have to figure out a way to produce it without being held hostage by the advertisers.
There's a problem if the news makers are also the ones that are buying all the ads.
Yeah.
That's a situation that you
Right.
really don't want and can't tolerate.
Right.
Because if you do something critical, if you say something critical about somebody that is actually in a position to make news and they're the ones that are signing the checks for all the advertising in town, that is an intolerable situation for the people that are actually doing the news, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know what you can do about that, but I mean, I could grab 2 or 3 people from each one of the news gathering organizations in town, and I think people would be shocked if I said, lids off, no chains, ask all the questions you want to, tell everybody where the bodies are buried, and these journalists would go absolutely crazy with delight to be able to say what they wanted to say and ask the questions they wanted to, and just be able to tell the truth.
Yeah.
But they're comfortable. I'm comfortable to a degree. We like living here. Nobody wants to lose their gig. It's no fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's so much more they could do. They could be so much more inventive. We just fall into these calendar scheduled stories. Who wants to hear the words pumpkin spice again
I hope I
for the
never,
next several
ever
weeks?
hear it
I
again.
mean, my God,
Yeah.
help me out here.
Well, so how much of that, one last question on that, we'll move on topics. How much of that do you think is the fact that we have a lot of rookie journalists in Chattanooga, and how much of it is, editors putting the kibosh on stories?
It all comes together. We've always had rookie journalists.
Yeah, we have.
And our place in the market, it rises and falls.
Yeah,
for
we're
radio,
100 roughly.
Yeah,
in
yeah.
major
For radio, I
MSA.
mean, when we added Cleveland, we jumped up again.
Yeah.
So that helped us to a large degree. But no, I think it is. I would say that for all the positives that some of these big public-private non-profit partnerships, for all the good that they've done, they also wield a lot of clout.
Yeah.
They have very large checkbooks, and they buy big full-page ads. And when you pull those ads, you get a lot of attention inside a newsroom.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That does make sense. Yeah. And this might just create more perverse incentives, but I do wonder if the city couldn't do, I think the city needs to do a better job generally of public communication. I don't know why they couldn't buy media, on local outlets. I'm a huge fan of WUTC too, and
Sure.
long may it wave.
Of course.
But we've got to figure out a way to monetarily support local media outlets because it could get worse.
I'll say it.
It's not great now, but it could get worse.
I can say it with no qualms whatsoever.
Yeah.
The CVB sits on a mountain of money, and they spend it very well.
They don't
if
spend
you,
it
if
here,
you
though,
don't go outside of Chattanooga, you have no idea how often and how mercilessly people get hit over the head with the message about Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Oh, I know.
They
Yeah.
do a great job telling that story in Birmingham and Atlanta.
Yeah, I
and
say all the
Nashville
time,
and
if you're down
Knoxville.
there on an overnight business trip, turn on the TV in the
Yes.
morning when you're getting ready, leave the TV on, and you'll probably see an ad for
Yes.
Chattanooga, and you'll be shocked.
Spread
And
the love around.
It's a wonderful thing. You're like, that's an amazing, they are good at it.
Yeah, absolutely.
The ads are fantastic, but you never see them if you live
Once
here.
they get here and they get here in the hotels here, they might not know where to go, because they don't really get any direction here.
No, well,
that's my opinion.
We got a plan for that, too. Well, back to the localism thing. Are there any particular things about Chattanooga, any problems or issues you think that are unique to Chattanooga, or that rise to the level of really the first things we should be worrying about?
I think I will go back to the phrase I used, that poison phrase that was here when I first got here, that I did not believe in at all. And then I realized that there's some truth to it, even though the actual cliched euphemism is no good. Power structure. I think that so many people came up thinking that there was no reason for them to try, because there was somebody sitting somewhere in a room that had all the strings.
Yeah.
And so there was no reason in even making an effort, because their efforts would be squashed. And that mentality needs to go away, and that is generation strong.
Yeah.
Generation strong. And I've seen that there is evidence of that happening, but people have got to know that if they get active and they get organized, look at what other people, especially new blood, new people that have come into this community have been
which
able
there are a few.
have been able to get done.
Yeah.
And that's it. New people who come in who are energized and say, to hell with this.
Right.
I don't like this. We're going to make this go away. Or, you know what? We need this. To hell with not having this. We're going to get organized, and we're going to make this happen. Yeah. And it happens all the time, and it's almost always some sort of catalyst, some sort of spark from somebody outside. Yeah. And I'm going to say it again, it's the local folks who need to understand that they actually have the numbers and the power and the push and the pull.
Yep.
And that's, for some reason, that has never really completely translated.
Well, there are a lot of folks here who have never left, and nothing, no harm in that. But it is a very different perspective, and I think we're in a good place in Chattanooga in terms. There are a lot of people who've left and come back, and then there are a lot of people who come here from elsewhere. and discovered it and have said, hey, man, this is like Shangri-La, I'm never leaving. But for the people who have never left, sometimes I think they lack some perspective on what's possible because they get this sense of resignation, as you say.
And I think there's a lot of leadership out there that has been hungry to hear.
Yeah.
And nobody's spoken.
Absolutely.
I really do believe that, too.
I think you're right. Well, let's turn this whole conversation over.
Sure.
And, localism's well and good. I mean, I'm preaching it, as hot and heavy as I can. But
who was it before you? Who was it that originally said all politics is local?
I think it was Daniel Moynihan.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe it was. I could be wrong, but
Well, that really is what it boils down to.
Yeah, that's absolutely
What
right.
can you really control?
But so to national matters, I'm fascinated with I'm fascinated with dynamic tensions generally, right?
Sure.
Like two opposite truths where there's not one answer. You just have to hold both ideas in this kind of form of cognitive dissonance in your head and manage the tension between the two poles. So one of those would be, again, how can you be a localist? I mean, national stuff matters. We're all going to vote in November, right?
I hope so.
So how can
God, I hope
you reconcile? Is it possible to say who you're voting for and still be a nonpartisan? Because I think
Yes.
nonpartisanship is really important to the idea of localism, right? Because what's important in localism is you're more important in what you think and our relationship and our schools and our kids than some abstract idea of that I'm putting on my red hat or my blue hat.
Yes.
And yet national policy matters. So how do you reconcile those two things?
Well, in this particular situation, I think it's very easy. And unfortunately, I think we've all seen the polls and we've all seen enough in our own personal lives and we've heard enough personal anecdotes. People are losing friends and they're losing close personal ties and family ties over this upcoming decision and who they're aligning themselves with. I can't help it.
By the way, is there a fly on my head? I'm sorry.
I no matter what anybody wants to say and where they want to pay me into what corner, I have voted along no party lines.
Yeah, me
I
neither.
vote for the person. Bob Corker surprised me greatly. Zach Wamp, I used to call his followers Wamp Davidians when he first started. And
He might actually appreciate that.
literally, but I mean, and then he got in there and he changed. He actually did so much for this district. I think he was a very good congressperson. Yeah. I've seen Lamar Alexander, a perfect example of a Republican that I think has done a tremendously good job. I hate to see him leave. I absolutely, this is Jeff Stiles speaking, I would do anything to remove the current president from office right now. I'm going to vote against
Anything
him with
legal,
malice.
probably,
With
right?
malice.
That's-
And there's absolutely nothing I can say good about him as a person or a president. I'm going to vote as hard as I can with all of my might.
No hanging Chad on your ballot?
No, and I'm not going to vote my conscience and vote for a third-party candidate because I've got to vote for Joe Biden simply because I want Trump out of there, just as the former NSA and CIA and FBI director do, just as most of the people in the current military do, just as the JAMA yesterday said, vote everybody out of office. I mean, this guy is a wreck. He's a wreck, and for those of you who support him, you do what you got to do. I don't want to lose friends. I don't want to lose supporters. I don't want to lose listeners, but that's the way I feel.
Yeah.
And that has nothing to do with what I want to do here in Chattanooga, Tennessee. But for this country, he has taken us down the wrong path. And I will vote how I feel in other offices the way I feel like I need to vote for those offices and for the people in those offices. Straight party tickets have never made any sense.
Right.
Never made any sense.
Nor to me.
So, I mean, you are running for mayor.
Yeah.
You are a Republican? Am
I mean,
I?
not
Are
really.
you a
I mean,
Republican?
I look, if you look at my voting record, it's mostly Republican. But I voted for Bredesen. I voted for Mayor Burke the first time. I voted for I voted for Dukakis way back in the day in college. So I've voted, but I'm almost exactly like you. I have voted both ways. Now, I grew up in a moderate Republican household back when the Republican Party was about Howard Baker, and I think we all had this sense of common purpose, very frankly. The debate was just how we got there, right? It's no secret. Like I, too, was, I had a front row seat for Trump's sort of rise to fame in New York when I was at Columbia and around the whole Central Park 5 thing. And I thought the guy was a creep then. And then when he
That's a good description.
came on the national scene, I understand. I've come to accept and really understand the anger and the frustration that drives a lot of people to support him. But there's no way in hell. There's no amount of, paper, what am I trying to say? Clothespins that I could put on my nose to make myself.
If you voted for disruption, you got it.
Right.
You got it.
Yeah.
You got your disruption.
Yeah.
Now, please stop. Stop the disruption. We've had enough of it. We're disrupted. Business as usual there is no business as usual. We're not usual. We're not normal.
Yeah.
And the man is dangerous. And
Well,
if
I
you
think
actually start listening to some of the people that are up there around him, it's hard to find anybody that is not acting out of fear and or cowardice, not necessarily the same thing, that will tell you any different.
Yeah.
The guy's got to go, and that's just all there is. And that has nothing to do with partisanship. That's just common sense.
Yeah, it's tough for me, running because I've never run for anything before in my life. So the whole notion of this bubble, I mean, again, I'm not a party guy. I'm very much like you. I vote for the person. And I look at the policies. I've looked at both policies. And again, very frankly, I think if you look at, I'm concerned with, early childhood education, big point. The not just economic development generally, but this idea of the rise of the rest, that mid-sized cities have different challenges than major cities, and we have to kind of rebalance things more to Chattanooga and really leverage technology and EPB. So I can't. There's no two ways about it. I mean, I've got to vote for Biden, but that does not mean that no way does that abridge my dedication to localism, or mean that it's a struggle. It is that dynamic tension. Yeah, I mean, look, I'm a localist first and foremost. I really am, and the irony of it is, localism is about self-determination, right? I mean, it should be, and it's a very conservative principle, self-determination. So I don't see that as hypocritical, but I do think you go and you push the button in November, and you walk away and you forget about it, because you can't do anything about it after that. We all spend way too much time dwelling on it.
It's not an act of treason to vote against your guy. It really isn't, but that's what it feels like right now. I mean, there's a free floating angst in this country right now, and I feel almost like I live in hostile territory.
Oh, I look.
Out there
we
in
all
that
do.
God's country I was just talking about. Just simply because I feel this way about this one guy. You know what? He doesn't like NAFTA. I didn't like NAFTA.
Right.
He's talking about bringing the troops home. Bring the troops home, for goodness sakes. I can throw him bones. I can find all kinds of common purpose and common ground.
Yeah, is there anything that you could say that he's done well?
There's one right there.
Yeah.
I think the multinational trade agreements that began with NAFTA, that then went on to the Caribbean Basin Agreement, and all the rest of them have been disastrous. I think he's done a pretty good job in fighting the opiate addiction. There are several things that he has done fairly well, but he can't get to what is his second term even going to be about? What is his health care plan? He can't get beyond his own. Never mind.
Well, no,
It'll
I'm
just
just
get
look. I
worse.
mean,
It'll only get worse from here. The man's a mess, and he just needs to go. I fear for America with him at the helm. President Pence, step up, take over. I'm ready for you. Whatever it takes. Biden, put him in there, yank him out. We just need something to change. We're on a bad course.
Yeah, look, I mean, I agree. I mean, and for me, it's a funny thing about just trying to state your case there and get immediately refocused on this place and the ground under your feet and the policies that are best for Chattanooga. So that's the way I'm looking at it. And as it turns out, what's best for Chattanooga from a policy perspective matches my gut, which I'm a big leadership guy, right? I from the beginning, I place a really high premium on quality leadership, and I worry a lot about the damage done to our, the social fabric of this country. So look, I look forward to getting it behind us one way or the other.
Thank God.
And moving on and getting people focused on what they, in a way, I've said this many times before, it's like a version of the Serenity Prayer. You familiar with that? I'm probably,
A little,
yeah.
more than a little.
Right, more than a little. I mean, but it is like that. Localism is a good reflection of that because, for those of you that don't know, it sort of goes like, God give me the courage to confront the things I can control, hint, hint, which are local, and the wisdom to
know the difference, the serenity to accept the things I can't, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yes.
And that's it, right?
Yeah.
And you can't, beyond going and casting that ballot in November, you can't control that stuff.
No.
Forget about it. It's killing people.
You can wring your hands.
It is ruining
all day
families.
long.
It is, and so do your thing in November, and then put your shoulder into work in Chattanooga, where you can join a board and get involved and actually make a difference, and that energy will be returned to you.
Yeah, there's some healthcare issues around here you could put your shoulder to. There's a wall around here that could be actually built, that needs to be built at an actual brick and mortar location that could use some volunteer work. There are tons of opportunities for everybody to find something to do here in our own town. You can flap your flags on the back of your truck, and you can put your bumper stickers up.
Yeah.
You know what? Here's my.
I want to see
sticker.
a flag on the back of a pickup truck that says "Better Schools." That would be.
Yeah,
pretty
that's what I'm saying. Here's my bumper sticker that everybody right now in America in 2020 could actually put on their vehicle, and I think could support everybody. And it says, "I love my country, but I fear my government."
Yeah.
And it's a shame, but I think everybody could feel that way right now. And I feel that way about the president that's currently in power, and a lot of people feel that way about the president that could be in power.
Well,
let's work on that as we can in little increments, but let's do what we can about this government and this city and this county and this community right here, right now, and we can do something about that today and tomorrow.
Well, the whole original idea, not that we should romanticize it too much, but the whole Aristotelian idea of the city-state, when democracy was first conceived of in Greece, was around the city-state, and of course we shouldn't romanticize it because it was only white male landowners that could vote. But the point is, it was always meant to be, in essence, a small-scale enterprise where the span of control was short and brief. So again, I just would encourage everybody to return to that and to try to set aside that partisanship. And I'll be so glad when November's past us.
That same era also, he held up the dialectic, the idea of being able to hold two opposing ideas in your mind,
right,
honoring your opposition's argument before you decided to try to take it apart gently.
Yes, that was Plato, not Aristotle.
Do it in a civil manner.
Yes.
Plato, Socrates,
whatever,
Aristotle,
Greeks.
all those crazy Greek guys.
Right.
But whatever it is, we're not following any of their paths right now.
No, we're not, and it's look, it's the old Chinese proverb: "May you live in interesting times."
I don't want to anymore. Give me some boredom.
Enough interesting
times. I want some dull, boring times, please.
Yeah, well, it'll really be interesting. The next couple of years will be very, very interesting to see. But to your point about fearing the government, it's not a universally accepted principle, I don't think. But it's ironic to me that a lot of the Trump supporters I know really are what I would describe as nihilists, right? They just want to blow it up. To your point, the disruption thing.
Yes.
Because it wasn't working, and it wasn't working, right? There's no way to put a spin on that. It was not working. To your point about labor and income and the divisions between between major markets and smaller markets and rural and in urban markets, and so. Change is dizzying and difficult, so it's going to be an interesting 6 months.
I don't know anybody that was just loving the status quo.
No.
But it seems like we were just getting more of the status quo, and the division was getting wider.
Yep.
I don't know why. I'm nowhere near smart enough to know the answer. I just know that the questions need to be asked, and right now it's not a very good atmosphere for asking questions. If you ask questions, you're unpatriotic.
Yep.
That's no way to be in America.
I agree. Well, we've been here about an hour. You got any other burning topics or issues you want to cover?
No.
Anything
I've
we've
enjoyed
left
this.
out?
This is a whole different. I usually just do this once a day.
I know.
I got my dander up now.
We
got to
I'm
stop.
glad it's not easy to get you excited after all these years. I feel like Liz Taylor's seventh husband. You know, it's trying to make it interesting for you.
Was that the carpenter?
I don't know. That's a famous old joke. You know, you're happy to be here and
Yes.
trying to make it interesting. But I'm glad that it was interesting for you. If
It was.
Yeah.
It was. I wish you the best. This is fun. Podcasting's fun, isn't it?
It is fun, you know. It's come pretty easily to me just because I love having conversations, and all this equipment is just kind of in the way. But it's great. It's been fun.
conversation
Will
we
continue to be
normally
fun. Any you want to do yourself a shameless plug where people
Sure.
that might not know you
I
can
have
hear
no
you?
problem doing that.
Yep.
I'm on in the morning, Nooga Radio, 92.7, NoogaRadio.com. Got streaming audio there. We're on Facebook too. I was not made for these
Facebook
times.
Live, yeah.
Facebook Live, and
That's how I watch in the morning when I'm getting ready in the morning. Sometimes
yeah,
I'll turn it on.
I am completely unaware that we're on camera. I promise you. So don't judge me by the way I dress. I still think I'm on the radio. Facebook Live, and I do podcasts. I do two. You find them at fredpodcast.com.
Mm-hmm.
One is called Rockyology. It's an hour-long music show, and it airs at 92.7 on Friday nights at 6.
And it's
they're-
outstanding.
It is good.
It's
isn't
outstanding.
it?
I mean,
I
again,
told you
don't
I started with music.
People forget that Jeff has got this background in music, and I think still that's probably where your heart lies. But as a curator of great and significant music, you have
Arcane,
no equal.
Esoteric
Yeah.
rock and roll and
Yeah.
the roots of rock and roll. The other one's just called Storyville because, as you said, I have been blessed and or cursed with a very interesting life. And I have lots of interesting things that have happened to me and the people around me. And I draw interesting people to me. And I have been given the ability to tell their stories with a little flair, too. So find them at fredpodcast.com, archived. So thank you.
Well, this has been great. Thanks once again to you, Mr. Stiles. I
you.
look forward to many conversations in the future, probably not in here, but at your place
Sure.
next time. And I hope everybody listens to him every day, because if you want to keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on locally, Jeff has always been my lifeline and always will be. Long may he wave.
Thank you.
Yeah. And a big thanks to our audience for tuning in. Without you, there's no show whatsoever, or at least if a podcast happens and nobody watches, does it still happen?
Yeah.
Epistemological question.
If it falls in the forest.
Yeah. So we'd love to hear your comments on today's conversation. If you'd like more of this, just share it if you think it's interesting or important. I'd like to thank local artist Summer Dregs again for contributing his music to the podcast, and OCI for this really sturdy furniture, which is fantastic. You've been watching Common Purpose. I'm Tim Kelly. Stay healthy and stay hopeful, Chattanooga. We'll see you next week.
Common Purpose is produced by Emily Kate Boyd with the support of the Chattanooga Workshop.